At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. Only on Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. This is Super NES Podcast, episode number 198. I am Greg, joined by Joe.
Hello.
And we very much appreciate your patience. We are back from a longer than expected hiatus here. So let me just say that moving long distance sucks, and I'll just leave it at that. But it took a lot longer than anticipated to get my stuff in the movers. So, but I finally have moved from Providence, Rhode Island to Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm finally settled into my new place, and things are finally going well enough to record this podcast. And I also want to thank Joe and also my friend George for doing an episode of the podcast ad lib during my absence as well too, to help cover things. So thank you again, guys, for doing that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
So luckily I already had all the research done for this episode before I left Rhode Island. And spoiler, this is a fairly short game, so I didn't need too much time to play it again to refresh memory on things, so we're good to go with this. We're covering this episode a game called Operation Logic Bomb. Full title: Operation Logic Bomb: The Ultimate Search and Destroy. Known in Japan as Ikari no Yosai, which translates roughly as the Fortress of Fury. So, once again, Japanese titles tend to sound a lot cooler than their American counterparts.
Right.
But this is actually a game that I had never heard of until I happened to find out on Switch a couple months ago. I was just flipping through the Switch Online Super NES emulation store one day, and I'm like, what's this game? Never heard of it. So, played it for a few minutes, liked it enough to want to cover the podcast, and here we are. So. Joe, had you heard of this game either?
No, I had never heard of this game at all. I was baffled when you mentioned it, and I was glad that you mentioned that it was on the Switch Online store or online service, because I had never heard of this game. I didn't know where to start looking for this game, and then when you were like, "Oh, it's on the Switch Online," I was like, "I got Switch Online. We're good."
Yeah, you've had it for longer than I have. I'm surprised you didn't see the game.
Yeah, it's not, I'll be honest with you, with the Switch, I love the Switch, I love the portability of it and everything, but I am paying for a service that I don't use, so I pay to get all, I paid for the expansion to get the N64 and Genesis games, but
yes.
I rarely pop in to play the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, or Nintendo 64 games, ironically. It's mostly, first party hardware and software, and that's basically it,
I think there actually is a pretty good selection of games across all four services, though. They're not. It's not a huge selection of games, but I think the games they have on here are a pretty good mix.
And I agree, and it's worth every penny.
Yeah,
but it's also one of those things where it's when I think of retro gaming, I'm either gonna pop in my Retro Pi, Raspberry Pi, or I already have it set up on my PC. So it's if I think of retro gaming, I'm thinking my PC or the Retro Pi. I'm not thinking my Switch, even though the Switch is an option. And I have the Contra collection there, and I have the Castlevania collection. I have
same.
The Capcom arcade collections and the beat 'em
I
ups
also
and
have
all
the
that. All that stuff. I specifically bought on the Switch so that I can have all that stuff on the go. But it's I stick to Mario Kart 8. I stick to Mario Odyssey. I stick to the AAA titles and whatnot that are in current games than the older stuff.
Yes. So, Yeah. So anyway, that's where. I was just flipping through the games the games that was available in there one day, and most of the games I recognized. There was a couple games I didn't. And this one was the only Western released game I hadn't heard of, so it caught my interest. One last quick note about that. I do think one area that the NES emulation section has an advantage in, and I wish the other services offers it. There's a lot of NES games that have the NES games on there that offer what's called like a second chapter, where it's like you actually the game. You can play the game in like the second game mode, or like later on in the game, or if a hard setting or whatnot. And it's like that's a pretty cool feature out of the box. So I wish I wish the services offered that, but anyway, so and like they are still trickling games into the other services. It looks like when I saw, but I haven't seen any Super NES games added for a while, unfortunately. So hopefully they will add more games later on in the future to that. But anyway, so Operation Logic Bomb probably, if you want to play the game, it probably is easier to get on the Switch, because otherwise there is no other legal way to get the game these days. So this game actually has a pretty interesting history that I didn't know about. This actually is a sequel to two Game Boy games. The first Game Boy game actually came out here in the West as an early Game Boy game called Fortified Zone, which came out to North America in September of '91. I did not know this, but then of course, as soon as I played Fortified Zone during when I had a Game Soon as I saw the connection, I'm like, of course, it's obvious, but because it's like Fortified Zone does play a lot like Operation Logic Bomb. Had you ever heard of Fortified Zone or ever played it, Joe?
No, I had not, and I actually just learned about this connection literally like last night. Because I was like, I was going to sit down and play the game to kind of refresh myself before we recorded today.
Right.
Yeah. But I decided I'm just going to jump on YouTube and watch a couple gameplay videos, and one of the videos was playing. And like I had went off and kind of made dinner sort of thing, so like it kept running, and a review played right after it, and the guy who was reviewing it was talking about the history and mentioned Fortified on the Game Boy, and I was like, okay, I was like, I'm gonna have to check that out, and I still have not checked that out, but I am definitely gonna check out the Game Boy game for sure.
You probably saw the SNES Drunk review of the game, which is a very good one, actually. So, but anyway, it totally makes sense that the games are sequels, because like Fortified Zone does play a lot like Operation Logic Bomb. Operation Logic Bomb's a bit fancier of a game; it's a bit more polished. But Fortified Zone I remember as being like a decent game. It's not great by any means, but it doesn't like cool. But just like the game did do some like cool things in a pretty like unique way. Which, spoiler, this game kind of applies to this game as well too. So, and to make things even more confusing, that game in Japan was also called the same game, the same name as this game, like Akari no Ayosai. But anyway, luckily for us in North America, we got different names to it. There was also a Japan-only Game Boy sequel, Ikari no Yosai 2, which I've never played, which I'll have to check out at some point as well too. So. Anyway, these games were made by a company called Jalco, which we've covered before in the past. Jalco was I'd say Jalco was a hit or miss publisher as far as games went. They had some really good games. They also had some very like crap games. So, the games that they did very well. They did have some very good franchises. Like for sure. So
yeah, for me, all I remembered them being responsible for was like the RBI baseball games. I think
Bases Loaded.
Yeah. So
that's the best franchise. Yes.
So it was one of those where I was like, oh yeah, I was like, I know that company, and then I was like, but what else have they done?
Quite a lot, actually. But
yeah,
they actually put out like a ton of games. But like they're probably best known like the NES games that they did. That they did because it's some very good NES games that they did. Like City Connection, But the Maniac Mansion they published, which was actually like a Lucasfilm game.
Yep.
Stein Axe, which is a favorite of mine. I've always loved that game. Pinball Quest, which is a very unique pinball game. I always like that game like a lot. Shatterhand, which is like a fun action game. So on the Super NES, like real quick, they're probably best known for doing like Earth Defense Force, Go, which is a soccer game, King Arthur's World, which is like an RPG type game, Utopia, which is like a Civ style game, R-Type 3 was one of the games they published in the like some other stuff. So,
okay.
But anyway, yeah. So, the game the game came out in Japan in April of 1993. It came out in North America in September of that year, and Europe also got it later on that year, like as well too. So, this game also must have done well enough in Japan because it made an appearance like on the Teleview system as well too. So, this is primarily an action game, single player game where you're controlling a player like through like a top down view as you work through stages, various stages like in a maze. So I'll let Joe here try to take a stab at trying to explain the gameplay here in a moment because it's. But I will talk about the plot here real quick because there's a plot. It's a very basic plot. It's a very basic plot. Like what action games have. It's very Doom inspired, it seems like, because it's like a group of people working like a cybernetic virtual reality experiments in a fortified lab, and something's gone wrong, and so you're sent in to find out what's going on and restore order. So like you are Agent Logan in the Western release. He actually was named a Hero, Hiro, in the Japanese release. He's a warrior who's been enhanced through cybernetics and other things to be super soldier. And he also wears a heat-resistant suit that's red that makes him resistant to red bullets as well too. So that's the actual. So that's the story for the game for what it is. So. The gameplay is probably this game's most shining feature, and it's most unique part of the game. Do you want to take a try trying to walk through the gameplay?
I mean, at the heart of it, like this is a top-down run and gun. That's the best way to explain this. But also, like this is like almost the perfect marriage between Metroid and Contra. So, hear me out before you start yelling at your headset listening to me say that. But, you find power-ups. You actually locate some. And yeah, it's not like, Metroid where you might have to defeat a boss to get that power-up or whatever. But there are certain areas where you find power-ups and you'll get your upgrade and whatever. And the cool thing is that you start off with a machine gun and a spread, machine gun, but you can acquire a laser that can be reflected off of things, a flamethrower, and even missiles, which I only got the missiles once, but, that's me. And then you can also acquire side, kind of like helpful items, which is you can get mines, which are, I don't know, I found them to be pointless because you have to push on the directional that you want them to explode when you lay them, but also like everything's moving when it happens, so you might set it off and it's just gonna go in the direction you chose, but the enemies might not be there anymore. That's always a possibility. So I always felt like the mines were kind of useless, but the most useful weapon in the game, for sure, or power-up, would be the hologram. I used the hologram I don't know how many times.
Yes. Yep.
Because it was so useful. You pop the hologram out, obviously the enemies, laser fire, all that's going to be directed towards that hologram, which either A, can free you up to get to wherever you need to get to, or B, give you the opportunity to sneak up behind the enemy and destroy them without them even knowing what happened. So, so I like the Metroid aspect of it, where like some parts of the levels were kind of blocked off or inaccessible because you needed certain weapons or items to get there. But this very much felt like Contra 3 a bit to me. Where, with the top-down run and gun type gameplay. Which I know Contra 3 didn't just have that. That was like a special Mode 7 thing that they had. But, that's very much the vibe I got here. And this game is short, and that was one of the biggest disappointments for me in this game, because I really enjoyed playing this game. But it's super short, and I think you'll agree with me, Greg, like, this game is uninspiring. The first, so there's 10 levels in the game, but, 6 of those or 5 of those levels are in the very same atmosphere in which you are in the first level. You're just moving, technically up and down as far as floors go, and then you finally reach outside, but, outside isn't really outside, because it looks like it's a hologram being projected, like you're on the holodeck of the Enterprise or something. So, it was nice to get that change of scenery, but also, it very much felt the same as the first level, and that was another big gripe for me, was I just felt like, visually, it was no way to really discern, what level or where you were. It was just more or less oh, here's more of the same, do the same thing, find, the alien technology, destroy it, and, move on.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. So I'll agree with most of that. So I also will add on the fact that, this game also is a little bit unique in the sense that while it is a run and gun, it's not a pure run and gun. As you move through the base, your progress will be hindered sometimes. Sometimes you either have to find a certain weapon or destroy something to unlock a door or a wall, whatever, to proceed. So the actions of the game tends to come in waves. It's to enter an area, you're frantically blasting everything for a couple minutes, then you then spend a couple minutes searching around, trying to find what to do next, unlock the area, go on to the next area, rinse and repeat. Whether or not you enjoy that depends upon what kind of games you like. Because I said before, this game is very unique in some ways by how it presents the gameplay. If you want pure action, you may be a bit bored by this. But for somebody who enjoys, like Joe said, the Metroid comparison is apt, I think, because it's you're not always a constant action Metroid either. So it's
right.
So you enjoy a more slower paced game, and the character does move a bit slow, so the analogy's apt there as well too. But you enjoy a more slower paced game. This is more right up your not right up your alley, I think. But so the biggest gripe I do have this game is the length. We'll talk about that more later on, I'm sure. But difficulty of this game I felt was pretty good. I thought the game only gives you 3 continues, but I really didn't have to. But I played the game. I only had to use 1, so I thought the game was not super easy, but it's more toward the easier scale of things.
Yeah, I liked the fact that they give you 3 continues. That was nice. You get a huge life bar. I was actually shocked at how big of a life bar they give you. And to be fair, I mean, once you kill something, it's dead. So if you do end up dying and you have to continue, everything that you've already killed is still dead. It doesn't respawn. So that is a plus. That being said, though, there are times where I died at a boss area and they would kind of warp you back to pretty much the beginning of the level. And then you're literally wandering around an empty level with nothing to do, trying to remember how you got to the boss in the first place, just to get to the boss and then have to fight him. But I mean, other than that, I mean, these are very small gripes. I did like the fact that you could use left and right to kind of control your angle or aim for the shot, and then be able to strafe. And this game is all about angles. About angles.
Yeah.
A lot of the boss fights seem pretty easy because, you might die because you got hit by, the energy wave or bullets the first time around, but once you figure out that pattern, there is a no pun intended logical way to set up your aim so that you can strafe and not be hit by the boss and be able to destroy the boss pretty easily. So
Yeah, I agree with all that. The controls of this game I thought like very good. Like, controls definitely like not an issue.
oh yeah, the controls are tight. Like I was
Yeah.
surprised at how like well this game handled.
Yes.
I didn't feel like it. Whenever I died, it was I felt it was my fault. It wasn't the
Yes,
game's
yeah.
fault. The game is not cheap. The game is not working against you. If you die, it's your fault. It's either A, you're not paying attention, or B, you didn't understand the assignment.
Yes. Yep. Totally. I agree with 100%. Graphics Joe already touched on like a little bit. Graphics this game, I think are a mixed bag. I do agree with Joe the fact that a lot of it is like very like repetitive and kind of boring, like uninspired. That said, there are some nice touches. There are those like flashing blue circles in the circles as you move in areas as you move through the base, which represent like rips. That rips like reality, as the corruption seeps in, which is a nice touch. I do like that a lot. The color schemes are kind of bland, but the actual graphics themselves are very detailed. There's some very like there's some very like nice detail. There's some very like nice detail on you, the enemies on the walls, the bosses. That's all very well done.
Yeah, and I wanted to wait until we got to the section to elaborate. So yes, like some of the backgrounds and colors are kind of like blah and repetitive. But if you like the first time you walk through a level, you're gonna notice all these very fine details on the wall, on the different mechanics, the floor itself, on your character, on the enemies, and it looks fantastic. But I just feel like some of those assets were reused a little too much.
Yes.
And like I said, like the colors just kind of don't pop off, which I guess kind of fits the motif because it's kind of got like an Aliens vibe to it. And it's supposed to be kind of like dark and brooding, so I get it. But at the same time, like, I want some variety. And that's definitely, I felt like something that was lacking here. But yeah, overall, I mean, the graphics are fantastic for what they are. And I do agree, like, it's very detailed in some spots. It's just like I said, I just feel, some of it was kind of repeated a little too much and the colors were a bit muted.
Sure. Yep. I definitely agree with that. Music was fine. I really don't. So like, I know it's like it's typical. It's typical like action game music soundtrack. It's not. It's not great by any means, but as a matter of fact, I'm kind of hard pressed to even remember any of the music at this point. But it does a fine job keeping you entertained while you're playing the game. So I guess the basic level that's all you really need. So
yeah. So the music fits the game itself, but this is not one of those soundtracks you're going to be bumping in your car after the fact.
No, which is a shame because like a lot of action games have great soundtracks, like like Super Smash TV, Contra, like Gunstar Heroes. They all have like excellent music and soundtracks. Yep. But so this one's not. So I mean, this game. So overall, this game. Knowing now this game is a sequel to Fortified Zone, it makes makes kind of sense because the games are so similar like in many ways, but because this game simply a bit larger, a bit more polished, has better graphics, that kind of stuff. But it's like all three of these games, including the Japanese only Game Boy game, they're all very, very similar. They all share the same DNA, and they all play pretty much roughly the same, and they all kind of have the same the same like pros and cons to them, the unique idea, like unique gameplay aspects in some ways, decent challenge, but just just too short. It's like I feel like this game was probably made by a team that Jalico's B team that just did just like, okay, we have 6 months before you need 6 months. Like we need you guys to help out on this like huge release. Like let's get busy. Let's have them crank some.
Right.
Crank something out. Like in the meantime. So it's like, I mean, it's a well done enough game. Don't get me wrong. Programming wise, it's solid. Joe mentioned, the controls are tight, the gameplay is fine. I like the more methodical, slow-paced, run and gun nature of this game. It's like, just the main, the overwhelming biggest drawback is just the length. Like, the average playtime of this game is about like 40 minutes, like give or take. And speedruns of this game have, the speedrun of this game is about half the time, like 20 minutes. So, it's like, I kind of wish this game had been, this franchise had been continued, because I think, like, if there had been like a PlayStation entry or whatnot, there's a lot like bigger and larger. That would have been a lot of fun, especially like different stages, different characters, that kind of stuff. So, but unfortunately, this was it. This is the last game. This is the last game in the franchise. So, that short length is really is the biggest complaint I have. The other complaints I have this game are all like small nitpicks. Like Joe mentioned, the graphics can be a bit bland, like uninspiring. 2-player mode would have been awesome. The difficulty could have been increased a little bit, I think. But but there's like small points. It's like and like I said, whether or not you like the game depends upon even more depends on more tolerant, like the more slower paced run and gun type of gameplay that something like Metroid offers. So, having said all that, I did have fun with this game. So I did enjoy it like while it lasted. If you enjoy games like this type and you have a Switch, by all means check it out. I mean, it'll be a short gameplay, but I think you'll enjoy the gameplay, while it lasts.
Yep, and I agree. I totally recommend this game. And actually, I even recommend checking out the Game Boy game, because while we were just talking, I just kind of popped it on my little handheld emulator and had to check it out. So it's a little more difficult because, like, you don't have that fixed angle to be able to shoot. Like, you have to really line up, and you take damage pretty quickly. But that being said, it definitely reminds me of something, those old school NES games that are, NES hard, as we say.
Yes.
So, yeah, I really enjoyed this for what it was. Like Greg said, it's nitpicks. It really is. And, like, if both of us are saying that the biggest downfall to this game is the length and it being too short, then that's a testament to how good this game is. That, both of our complaints are that it's too short, there should have been more of it, and that you should definitely check this out. And if you have a Switch, you have no excuse as to why you are not checking it out.
Yes, because the NES and Super NES emulation collections of the Switch are available like the basic, subscription, but I think most people probably have.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And
if you don't, it's $20 for an entire year. You should have.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So, this is really kind of a surprise the game's even on the Switch, to be honest with you, because it's like, Jaleco's no longer around. Their games have been, games have been acquired by their company, but there are other Jaleco games on there as well too, including the awful, what's that terrible fighting game that they did? Turf Wars, I think it's called.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There are other Jaleco games on there too, and I'm like, Turf Wars, why the hell are you on here? You suck. But, so obviously Nintendo got a deal with the company that has the Jaleco rights these days to put some games on there.
Spoiler for Turf Wars, jeez.
I will avoid covering that game for as long as possible if I can help it, because there are so many other better fighting games on the system. That's what I said before. Jaleco's track record's all over the place. They had some really great games. They also had some really horrible games. So, But anyway, yeah. So this is definitely a pleasant surprise to find on the Switch. So like I said before, they enjoy games of this type, like like Contra, Metroid, whatever, and don't mind the slower pace to the slower action pace of it. By all means check it out. Like you'll be done in an hour probably, but it's a fun game like while it lasts. So. This would have been ideal for Rento back in the day, I think, because it's like nobody.
Yes.
I can't see anybody really being happy they had gotten the game for Christmas or whatnot, especially if it was like one of their only games. It's like, oh god, but but a Rento, this would have been like a fun weekend of Rento, I think. But so,
agreed.
But and the box cover art shows like pretty nice, I think too. So like I'll also give some points to it like for that, as well too. So, but anyway, our thoughts on the game pretty much matched other reviews like this game, both contemporary like modern ones. They all give the game like average scores, average ratings. They also ratings, and they all said the same things that we did pretty much. The average score, the average score for the game is hovering around like 70%, like 3.5 out of 5 stars, 70%, 60%. So like average ratings, which again kind of matches what we said, and their comments also kind of mirror like what we said about the game too. Anyway, like pros and cons. So I guess it's not like a huge shock. We're actually, there's no cheats with this game. So, and if you want the game, it's I don't think this game was made in large amounts, but I think because the game is pretty much unknown, the game can be had for a relatively cheap price. Cart prices range wildly. CIB prices for this game are not that much more expensive, and seem like like much more quote unquote stable. So like if you do want a physical copy, whether you get cart versus CIB depends upon your patience. I think at this point, 18 copies. This game were recently listed at the time of doing research on this in September of 2022. 15 copies that sold recently. These prices include shipping. Like I said before, there was a wide range of cart prices. Cart prices for the game sold anywhere from $15 to $61. So CIB prices were not that much more expensive. $75 to $78 for the game complete. There was even still a copy of the game that sold recently for relatively cheap by COD standards, $500.
Yeah, so it looks like on top of you should play it for the Switch. It's cheap enough. You should just pick it up for the Super Nintendo if you have a Super Nintendo.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that that $50 copy of the game was a bit of an outlier because it was a former rental copy with a bit of label damage, but still a Super NES cart for that price is not bad.
Not bad at all.
Anyway, so that's Operation Logic Bomb. Interesting game. I would have loved to see I would have loved to see the concept continued like in later systems, but just like like Joe said, the biggest gripe we have with this game is the short length, and that's not it's not really the game's fault directly in and of itself. So,
right.
Definitely, if you enjoy games this type and have a Switch, by all means check it out. So you may have overlooked the game, on the collection just like Joe did. So, not to put you on blast, Joe. But
it's all good.
So anyway, next time on this podcast, we're covering one of the heavy hitters for the system for sure. So we already had covered way back when with George Breath of Fire 2, but we never looked at the original game. So Joe and I are going to be covering Breath of Fire next time.
Yeah.
So this is a game. Yeah, this is a game I've not played in a long time. So I'm gonna have to go back and refresh my memory on it.
This is a game I've never played, so my experience.
So.
Yeah, a little tidbit before we sign off. So my experience with the Breath of Fire franchise was literally the PlayStation with Breath of Fire 3.
Okay.
And then Breath of Fire 4, and it hasn't expanded from those two games. So this will be my first time going backwards. Yeah, and I've heard so many bad things about the sequels after 4 that I don't think I'll ever touch any of those. But
Yeah, same.
I definitely want to see the genesis of the franchise for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I have played and beat all 4. Well, the first 4 Breath of Fire games.
Yeah.
And I believe that I think the GBA re-released Breath of Fire did add some extra features. I'm trying to remember now. It's been a while, but because I was playing on the GBA way back when.
Okay.
But I'll have to check that out again. But anyway, that'll be the next podcast. So, as always, we very much appreciate you listening to the podcast. You can find us on Facebook. You can also send me an email if you want to. That email is the SNESpodcast@yahoo.com. Joe, where can they reach you at?
You can find me on Twitter at JOESUX30. Also, you can find me on Facebook. I'm very public there. And then, I guess since I'm reviving it, I might as well plug the Radical Retro Roundup, which can be found on Facebook, and eventually Twitter, and eventually will be added into YouTube. So stay tuned.
Okay. Sounds awesome. So, all right, everybody. We appreciate you listening to the podcast as always. We'll see you again next time. And this time, no more hiatuses unless they're actually unplanned this time. So, as always, we appreciate you turning into us. And have a good day, everybody. Stay safe and be well.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Deep power.